Hello, I'm Claire Poole and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast, the show in which you get the inside track on all things sport and sustainability globally. Join me every week where I'll be chatting to a special guest about news, opinion and insights on how sport is moving to a more environmentally friendly future or taking action on climate change. Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Climate of Sport podcast with me, Claire Poole, and I am delighted to be joined this week by Joie Leigh, who is former GB and England hockey player and now sustainability coordinator at Birmingham Commonwealth Games 2022. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your chats.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And I will just start the top of this podcast by saying, although you've obviously got an incredibly awesome role at Birmingham Commonwealth Games, we are talking to you today as Joe, not as a representative of the Games, just for clarity on that, because there'll be other opportunities to hear more about the Games, etc. But today I really want to chat to you about you and your journey and your work in sustainability. Ace, so for those who don't know, you've obviously had an amazing career in terms of hockey. So why don't you tell us about your career as an athlete, and then we'll get into how you got into the sustainability sphere as well.
Yeah, God, it seems like a different lifetime ago now, although it's only a few years ago. Life moves on quick. But yeah, I guess I've always been a sporty person from a sporty family, ever since I was young, and I played all the sports when I was younger. But through school and stuff, just loved the team aspect of hockey. That was the thing that really kind of grabbed me, I think. And I guess once, you just kind of go through the motions at school and go through from clubs to age group levels and stuff. So I was kind of worked hard and was lucky to progress nicely through the junior ranks. And then, while I was in my second year of university, I got a full-time contract with the Great Britain Centralised Programme, which is based out of Bisham. And so from that was kind of the start of my, I suppose, professional athlete journey. I think I was 19 at the time. And then, went very much into juggling between full-time hockey and studies. And that's, sports at times, elite athlete is I'm sure any athlete will tell you, is a very roller coaster ride, many ups and downs. And I grew up quite a lot during that time, from kind of a young university student at 19 through to, a few years later, having graduated and thinking, having that realization that you can't do hockey forever, and what's plan B and not plan B, but, where's that transition leading to? And I think I've always had that interest in sustainability and the environment through school. Did geography at university and kind of always just had in the back of my mind that was a topic area I was really interested in. And then I guess through my experiences in sport as an athlete, kind of noticed that sport and sustainability topic was there in like little pockets, but wasn't really that widespread, and was quite like a little gap. And I suppose that from my perspective was thinking how I'd even get into that sustainability space from a professional perspective post hockey, actually, starting in my own backyard, as it were, in terms of what's hockey doing, what's sport doing, was like a good kind of sensible entry point for me. And I guess that's how, those two things came together. While I was still playing, kind of start to explore through chatting to like Russ at Basis, and it's such a nice collaborative network of people working in the sports sustainability space. And I guess just leveraging that kind of, I always think it's so funny that people just enjoy speaking to athletes, because some don't quite get it, but making use of those opportunities that people are kind of interested in that kind of athlete thing, and actually opening up conversations around sustainability. And that's kind of where I transitioned, so that when I then stepped back from international hockey, I almost had a little bit of experience that, the very first stepping stone from which I could go out into the big wide world of normal careers, into that sustainability space. So I guess that's kind of how it all interwove together.
Yeah, and I think, well, certainly here in the UK, I think if I think back to the early days of sort of starting to, from me, my own transition from like pure sustainability and climate into sustainability in sport, which was about 2014-15, I think you were one of the first athletes, certainly I spoke to, who was doing this and that now, and we'll get on to talk about that for sure. There's, athletes is talking out more and more about this and using their platforms and etc. But I think back then there wasn't that many athletes really that were doing it. And I think you were probably one of the early ones, certainly maybe not globally, but certainly here in the UK, one of the early ones to sort of make that connection.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that was, just purely from me, my two sort of interests and trying to bring those together, and almost me trying to find my way in the world as well. And I guess just having that curiosity to explore it beyond kind of just in my own head. And I think that was really, as you say, beneficial in terms of perhaps being one of the first kind of athletes at that point to be asking those questions and trying to find out more. And, at that point, I barely knew much at all beyond a very basic understanding, but just that curiosity and then connecting with people who are just, so passionate in this space as well. Yeah. And I think, it was just a really good kind of entry point for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there, that's funny from your perspective. It's like, why are people so interested in hearing from athletes? And they really are. And I think the athletes as role models, I think as well, people who aren't athletes at an international professional level athletes are looked at in a certain way compared, I think, probably to other celebrities, if you like, or other people in the public eye, because I think people understand how much goes into getting to the top level of sport and how competitive it is and how much training has to happen, and almost a superhero sort of vibe of like, people like yourself and other athletes are just human beings like us all, but like what you can do seems superhuman. And I think that in terms of using that platform for good when you're looked up to, but I think that's hilarious that you're like, why are people
well, exactly, because I guess from my position, we are, we're all just human beings with, stressing out about the next selection, not worried, but, trying to perform at our best every day. And, some days don't go well and some days do go well. And, just kind of, it was what most people are trying to do in their everyday lives. But I think it was really interesting to me, and helpful to me personally, because it did open doors and conversations that perhaps I wouldn't have been able to open. But equally, I think in the same vein, whether it's athletes or it kind of opened my eyes to that power of, I kind of already kind of intuitively knew it, but more overtly from a sustainability angle, that power of sport to reach people and influence people and open up conversations, and the platform sport has to do those things, from a sustainability point, but from all angles of conversation and society. And I think that was the kind of interesting point for me of actually kind of, hang on a minute, sport does have sport's not immune from having an impact in these areas, like all other sort of businesses and organizations, etc. But actually what's unique about sport is it reaches so many more people and it grabs so many more people's attention. And there's so much opportunity there. Like, it's just a really fascinating kind of space. But yeah, it's still funny to me. But even being like kind of outside, like I don't really class myself as an athlete anymore. I'm just in the normal working world like everyone. And it's still, I mean, nice. Yeah, I look at other athletes and think that's really cool. It's just when I think of myself.
You've decided, you've taken yourself out of that box now. But that's another interesting point in terms of, as you said, way back, well, relatively way back when we first met. It was quite early on in this. There's been, I think, a lot of progress since then. And what, from your perspective, in terms of your views on that, how have you seen, or what's your perspective on where things are now with sport and climate change, the visibility of it, the role of athletes, etc.? How have you seen that transition in the last few years, and where do you feel that's going to now?
I think it's been a big transition, actually. I think the main progress point I see is it just becoming a lot more of a serious conversation. in more sports organisations and in, you know, some more sports events. And I just think that awareness is really building, and that just that recognition piece. I think that's been a big change from just a few people in a few small pockets kind of thinking about it and kind of recognising that, you know, a few organisations that have led in this for a long time. But now I think sport as a whole, and I think you just see it on LinkedIn on a weekly basis, the roles coming out now into around sustainability within sport is just, I think, reflective of that recognition piece that's happening across sport, that sport does have a role to play in this. You know, sport is at risk like every other part of society, from things like climate change and climate adaptation and climate risk. Equally, the impact sport can make, as we just mentioned a moment ago, on society as a whole, in terms of being a good example and trying to push innovation and catch people's attention and investment. So I think that recognition piece, and there's still obviously a long way to go with that across, but I think just, there's a way, it feels like there's a wave of that recognition at the moment, that momentum building. And I think in terms of, I guess, the future challenges of next, I guess, is I kind of seeing that, how do we leap from that recognition to action in a bigger wave across, you know, as I mentioned, there's lots of really good, exciting stories happening in sport around sustainability. But if we think about sports sector as a whole, I think, how do we get from that recognition to action and make that leap? And how do we make that a coordinated internal action within organizations? How do we kind of ring fence resource and budget to help enable that action to happen, rather than it being something that's just recognized as being important, but actually is not backed up by any kind of resource or budget, because, you know, it kind of in that space where it gets shoehorned into someone else's role for the moment and they have to try and take it on. And so I think if we want to bring the urgency that's required in this space, we have to try and find ways to create the budget and create the resource and push the agenda. And I think that's probably the next challenge. And as a sports sector widely, obviously there's really good examples across the sports sector that I'm sure you're covering your series about where that's already happening. But just across sport in general, I don't know, just how does that kind of match up with your thoughts on progression and since 2014, when you kind of transitioned into this space as well?
Got it. I think you're right in terms of the action, and I think there's always this conversation that are around talking about it versus doing it. And I think, to me, I totally agree. The action, you know, we really need to see the inroads now being made, but also I think there has to be a role for talking about what that looks like, and actually commitments to that action as well. Because a lot of sport, you know, sometimes, I've probably said this before, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but certainly people I speak to regularly, sometimes I take a bit of a temperature check for myself in my own head, because, like, if you look at the UN Sports for Climate Action Framework, you know, there's amazing commitments that have come out of that, and you know, a lot of action off the back of that, but there's still only just under 280 organizations that are signed up to it. And some organizations, yes, have decided not to, and they're still making commitments, etc. But that this talking versus doing, I think the two have to sit really closely together, because we want people to talk to the degree that they're making commitments externally to hold themselves accountable for the action. Whereas I see a lot of organizations that are doing, you know, and have been doing incredible actions behind the scenes, but almost where that piece is missing, where they talk about it externally. One, it's like, oh, we're missing the big win, because that's the whole the point, you know, or the big win for sport is the platform it's got. But also a bit like, you know, if you think, oh, I'm gonna just train, like I'm going running, I'm just gonna train for myself and I'm having a lovely time. At any time you can be like, I'm going to stop training now, no one knows. Whereas if you've put a thing out externally saying, like, I'm running a marathon, sponsor me, or I'm, you know, or doing an Ironman, whatever it is, once you say that externally, you have a bit of like right, I have to do this now. And that's, again, it's not saying that those actions aren't really credible and worthwhile and they're brilliant, but I think the external commitment and the talking about it, to me, is the holding ourselves accountable in the public domain to then continue that work. And I think there's loads of stuff around that again, another angle of that that's come up recently is I've had a few conversations about people saying, should we be recruiting ahead of sustainability? To your point about seeing a lot more of these roles pop up. Should we recruit ahead of sustainability? Because shouldn't this be everyone's role in the business, right? Everyone should take responsibility. So if we recruit one person, then it's going to be just like their responsibility, and maybe it won't be as holistic. But the flip side to that is there's no one in that organization to hold them accountable, because for other people, it will always slip. Whereas if you've got a head of sustainability, yes, it's everyone's responsibility, but you've got one person to corral all those people and to make sure it works. So again, I know within your role, like at the games, there's a good team of sustainability people you're working with, etc., because it's so crucial. But again, it's all these different. You're completely right in terms of the talking versus action, but I think there's that talking point still has to be in the action for me to make sure there's accountability of the action.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. And I think that, being on the right side of boldness, I suppose, to put something out there that perhaps scares you a little bit. And I think, from a sporting point of view, that's, guess what we love about sport generally, right? When we see teams or individuals, or they put out this bold ambition when they're young, and then we see that journey of how they get there, and it's not smooth, and it's they might never get there. That's kind of not the point at that moment in time. It's bold enough to kind of have that dream or have that vision and then go after it. And I think that's it's like getting that position right to be able to go out with that bold ambition, to hold yourself accountable, be brave enough that you might not know all the answers yet. And I think that's the difficulty around sustainability in particular, is that as soon as you put something out there, you're going to get asked questions, but you might not necessarily know the answers to the questions yet, which is a challenge. And that whole, no one wants to get caught in that kind of greenwash space, or so it's that real balance between the two. But I 100% agree in terms of that accountability. And it's an interesting point you said about shouldn't it be everyone's role, and that kind of I suppose devil's advocate of, what's the point in the head of sustainability if you're going to have it's got to be everyone's role. And I completely agree with the fact it's got to be everyone's role, and it's a cultural thing. But I think you still need some sort of leadership, and you still see some sort of accountability in order to foster that type of cultural meaning across all the different roles, so that when people are making decisions in their specific role, they're thinking about this stuff already. And that doesn't just kind of happen because someone at the top says it does. That has to be kind of like worked on every day, and someone has to be making sure that that's tracking in the right direction and is being worked on every day, because like anything that's new, people will forget if it's not their day-to-day job. So it's who's there to push it along. And I think it's such a collaborative space. Like even I don't know anything. I don't know all the technical requirements around like energy provision for an event, for example. We have specialists in the organization that look after all those different elements that come together to put on an event, or within your organization, all those different specialists that are at the forefront of their own individual kind of areas of expertise. We need them people, but we need someone who's coordinating stuff from a sustainability angle as well. Otherwise it gets forgotten, because we're not used to thinking about it in that way. That's why we're where we are, isn't it? So maybe the end goal is to have a head of sustainability and then not need one anymore. But I think because it's embedded within the culture, but I don't think we're at that point yet where we can't have dedicated resource from a sustainability angle, because it's not happening, obviously, is it, without that? So
absolutely. And I think isn't that like, in reality, how far away from me are we from sort of having to recruit a head of sustainability and then not need them anymore? I think quite far, because it's so intrinsic and it's so embedded in our organizational culture that we don't need. I think with the best will in the world, I think we're a long way away from that, aren't we, in terms
100% of miles away. Yeah, absolutely. And even then, you still need to maintain that culture, because something like that culture is such a powerful but fragile thing. Something, one bad kind of experience or and if it's not dealt with, and you haven't got someone there kind of bringing it together and dealing with it as is appropriate, that can go down the wrong track quite quickly. So no, I agree. Kind of in a utopian theoretical world, maybe we won't need one, but I think we're very far off that.
Eventually, hopefully, we'll wait.
Yeah.
Wait and see. But to your point as well, though, I think it always it never fails to surprise me when I chat to organisations that are doing loads and loads of work, how generally it boils down to one really passionate individual who just cares about this and has kind of pushed it in the organisation. And sometimes organisations are lucky enough that person is their CEO or a board member or something. But most of the time, it's kind of someone who's got a different role and they're doing it. And I think that, again, is another transition we need to see. And as you said, it's great to see more sustainability roles being publicised in sport, etc., because we're obviously in that transition right now where roles are being recruited in. But yeah, up to date, I think the majority of this work has happened off the time and back of people who just really care about it and want to see this happening more and put their own time into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, like I say, it's almost, I think I mentioned it like a few moments ago, that idea that it just gets, in the very initial instance, gets shoehorned into another role. And that's because someone's naturally passionate about it, or has asked to take over for it, and they want to have a bit more responsibility to progress, or whatever it is. But that's almost the first stepping stone. It's gets in someone else's role and then builds from there. And then I think the challenge is for that not to be taken for granted, that person who is passionate about it and is willing to drive it off their own back, that energy and that passion and that enthusiasm isn't taken for granted and I don't want to say wasted, but is not supported to then fully flourish and support that person going forward. Because otherwise it's quite an unmotivating place to be if you're trying to do something but you haven't got the support of the organisation. So but I think it's tracking in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think athletes, are definitely helping that. When I look at, again, if we take a step back and think about, to your point, how seriously it's taken, there's loads of, I'm sure, factors that are involved with that. But certainly I think the rise of mainstream media coverage of sustainability efforts within sport has really, really helped that. And globally now we're seeing a lot more coverage of it. And athletes have been a big part of that, because generally broadcasters or people writing up about it want to include something about the athletes who play on the field, or or the people at the forefront of that. So I think athletes have had and will have going forward a much bigger role to play in regards to that. So in terms of that, what I know you don't see yourself as an athlete, but I'm still going to talk to you like one, Jo. Do you see the challenge for athletes, or do you understand it if you think you're in your headspace of who you are, but you're at the peak of your career now and you've got the platform there? Do you see the challenges for athletes in terms of what our expectation or our hope for their potential to help with this movement is, versus the challenge of their day-to-day trying to achieve a gold medal or a World Cup or whatever it is? Like, how do you see that for athletes that are in that position now, and we've got this hope that they're going to take on this mantle?
I think it's a really interesting point about, I guess, because you're kind of alluding to this sort of like this increasing wave of sort of ambassador type people within sport who who are interested in sustainability or kind of whatever. And I think when you're in it and you're consumed by that sporting bubble, whether it's you're thinking about the next event or the next selection or your next PB you're trying to be, or it is such a consuming place to be, and that is kind of your everyday. But I do think there is a growing awareness around kind of athletes and the athlete mindset around this idea of like more than medals. I actually think that's probably a UK sport tagline, but this idea of athletes not just being the medal or the achievement, and for their own kind of well-being, having other strands and other interests to their bow that they can feel more fulfilled by, rather than just like winning or losing, because that's such a fragile kind of reliance if you're requiring on winning to make up your kind of identity and your self-esteem, etc. That's a really fragile place to be. And I think there's been a kind of greater understanding among athletes and among, I think, NGBs and stuff, that actually supporting athletes in other work that they're interested in and supporting them in kind of being curious about those things and how they can get involved in those things, I think is becoming a lot more to the fore than perhaps it previously was. And then with that, I think there is then an opportunity, if athletes are interested to be spokespeople in this space, that there's more support out there for them than ever before. There are challenges probably around hypocrisy and feeling under the spotlight, and you open yourself up to criticism and all those things. And I think that's probably the immediate fear and challenge. But I think there's a lot more conversation happening about that, and a lot more rational kind of narrative bringing up around that to support athletes in that space, and being able to deliver things that comes from a human place where not everyone is perfect, and no one's got this nailed in any way, but we're all kind of on that journey and all that. So I think it's kind of those 2 points really, that I think obviously some athletes will just be solely focused in the heights of their powers, and that's of course that's where they're at, and that's what they need to do at that point in time, and especially around competition time and stuff. But I do think there's a little bit of a realization that you're not just an athlete as well. It's a big part of you, but actually there's more things that you can do and explore if you're interested in, and there's a more support around that within sport generally. I think it's again that waking up to that kind of holistic athlete mindset and view in parallel to that greater support that's happening around some of the challenges, if you get in, speaking about sustainability, where you might not have the most in-depth knowledge because you're not an academic in this space, or you have to fly around the world for your job as an athlete, and that hypocrisy piece. So there are challenges, but I think there's a lot more support and a lot more of a change in mindset of how we can support athletes to speak up on these issues. But yeah, it will be a challenge, just and then on a very individual basis, right? Because if we want athletes to talk about this stuff, we want them to be authentic, we want them to really care, otherwise the message will get lost. And so yeah, we're not in the business of forcing athletes to speak up about these issues in any means whatsoever, because it has to come from an authentic, caring place. But I think what we can do is, for those athletes that are wanting to learn more, that are wanting to understand how they can make an impact either individually or by speaking externally more on these issues, that there are more levers there to support them to do that. And I think that is definitely emerging.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this, the intersection as well, as you said, it might not be, we're very focused on environmental sustainability, but it might be, for other athletes, broader purposes that are in different areas. Yeah, but I think that intersection with purpose and mental health is really, really important. I remember watching the Olympic Games, which was last year in the end, wasn't it, with it being rolling over, but and a male gymnast, I can't remember his name now, but he'd achieved gold at the previous Olympics, and then after that had reached his goal of his whole career of getting that medal, and then was really openly, very admirably talking about the fact he then went into a terrible depression that lasted a number of years, was in a really dark place because he reached the pinnacle of what he was trying for, and then not anticlimax, nothing. What am I doing now? So again, that broader purpose piece, which, as you mentioned, is becoming much more significant with NGBs and with all sports around mental health, etc., is really important. And I think, again, for those athletes that care in some ways about the environment, and again, this is part of some of the conversations we have as well, of like, we don't need all athletes to come out inauthentically with a banner about climate change, but maybe you're like a Katie Rood and you're vegan and you're very comfortable talking about that, or maybe you're a Hannah Mills and you saw the plastic pollution in Rio and you want to raise awareness. That's it. It's not always about the big banner stuff. It's what's the small piece. See a lot of athletes like around electric vehicles or food or plastic or waste, whatever. Talk about it in a way that feels authentic to you. But again, that intersected with that purpose and mental health element is a really, really interesting piece, I think, for the athlete element of this effort.
Definitely. And I think from personal experience with that, I think it was probably part of a catalyst for kind of my transition that I kind of spoke about at the beginning, in terms of, when I was, first couple of years of uni, it was straight into a centralized program. You're trying to adapt to that life. You're very focused on trying to be at that level, and, trying to deal with selections and, the ups and downs of it all. And I think I definitely had a kind of period in time where I wasn't in the best place, and, thinking about, that kind of, what if I don't have a medal, or I don't have a medal, like the outside world? So what am I more than that? What I've got more to offer than, what else am I than that? Because, and I think that's where, you kind of start asking those questions as an athlete, because you have that kind of, sometimes feels like a crisis in your mind, that you work, you put everything into this, and your whole kind of identity up to that point has been around that sporting goal. And as I say, you need that drive, and you need that determination, and you need that kind of conviction and sole focus. But it kind of, if you don't make it, it leaves you quite vulnerable. And so what are the safety nets, and what are the other, those other purposes that can help kind of keep you robust mentally in that kind of those challenging times. And that definitely happened for me, in terms of, okay, sport is difficult, emotionally difficult. Okay, so what else am I doing that provides that self-esteem in other ways, and provides that purpose in other ways? And, okay, well, I've got this real interest in sustainability. How can I ask more questions? How can I get to know more about that? How can I, ask people at England hockey or in sport more generally, and learn more about that, and add more strings to the bow? Because everyone has their own drivers in different ways. And I think, but for an athlete point of view, that's, for me, was a real interesting intersection, like you said.
And brilliant. More credit to you as well, to sort of to make that happen, and push that forward. And I just, as you were talking there, I was thinking, I wonder if part of that, obviously athletes have that drive for medals and for goals, etc., and that one track in some way mind around it. But also when you were saying that about being more resilient and having other areas to protect that, I wonder how that, I don't have the answer to this, but I wonder how it drills into, often athletes hear, when athletes speak out about other issues, they hear, oh, stay in your lane, we're not interested, just play, just play football, just play basketball, just run, just play hockey, whatever it is. It's almost elements of our society, we don't want to hear that from you. We just want to watch you perform, and that's what it is. I think that's not helpful, because everyone, we're all human beings, everyone is multifaceted and has a lot of things, and to a lot of people the sport element is obviously the largest part of their life if they're an athlete, but that doesn't mean they don't care about other things. But again, the LeBron James talking about the election and the journalist saying to him, stay in your lane, or shut up and dribble, whatever it was, that mentality, unfortunately, I think still pervades, and that's not helpful, I think, when you're trying to encourage athletes to perhaps do more, because they're hearing that in their surround sound, probably now on social media.
No, absolutely. Social media is a whole different black hole of a ball game. But I completely agree. It's not helpful in that respect. And I think, it's really challenging. No one wants to be criticised or, trolled or taken down for something that they care about and are trying to have a positive impact with. That's just not where anyone wants to be. But I think having that support that helps athletes navigate that challenge is really, really important, because unfortunately those challenges aren't going to go away. You're always going to have someone that's going to be the negative Nancy in the room, or going to be so it's how we support athletes to navigate those challenges. Unfortunately, I don't, in the world that we live in, don't see them going away. But I think there's a lot of sport out there where we can help athletes navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for me, even not as an athlete, but just as an organisation, when people give constructive criticism about what we're doing, I always ask, that's totally cool. I take that on board. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Because that's like, we're all trying, as you said, it's not easy. And I think, for athletes talking out about what they care about and using their platform for good, etc. None of us are perfect, but actually a lot of the people who call people out are not doing anything themselves. They just are deciding they want to take other people down. And actually just by asking the question of like, well, I'm just trying my best over here. What are you doing? Push it back. Can be really helpful. And obviously now, which is great through the likes of Basis and Eco Athletes and the Sport Ecology Group, and Athletes of the World, etc. There's so many now organisations that are helping with training and support and community and education for athletes. So I think the path we're on now, we're going to see a lot more of that, and hopefully in a credible way that they feel comfortable with as well, with all of that support. So there's loads and loads there. So it's so interesting to hear you talk about your journey as well, Joan. I'm conscious of time, but I guess just in terms of you, as we said, we're not really talking about your role necessarily in terms of the games, but just it must be brilliant for you to have landed in to bring your passions together, being able to do the sustainability stuff and the sports stuff within a role. Is that where you expected to land in terms of bringing these passions together?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely kind of step at that point a few years ago, stepping back from hockey and going into that kind of going into that sustainability profession. Yeah, I think in the longer term, I knew I wanted to bring those two things back together. I knew in the short term that I needed to go somewhere and learn quite hard and quite fast around the sustainability world in general, and the technical expertise that naturally I hadn't got because of other focus areas. Like I got general understanding of sustainability and stuff, but those more technical skills, I suppose I needed to go somewhere and learn those and learn off other professionals in the space, which I did, and with the ambition and the long-term ambition to bring sport and sustainability back together. And I guess, when this role I've probably landed kind of bringing those two things together a bit earlier than I perhaps thought I would. But when this role cropped up, it's over a year ago, beginning of last year, it kind of just sparked. I know, I was a bit like, you have those reservations. Oh, am I qualified for that? Do I know enough? Yeah. And then you're kind of like, just go for it. Just go for it. You've got to just go for it. And it's been amazing, and it's been exciting and challenging as well. But I find it really motivating every day just to be in that context of sport and sustainability, and having, feel very lucky to be working in a role that brings, two of my main passions together. And, by no means know all the answers and by no means I'm very much still learning. But that's kind of where I want to be. And then I suppose a bit of question mark from me after the games is over. So kind of end of my contract, sort of, in a few months' time, what's next? And I think that's probably a question mark for me at the moment, in terms of, right, do I need to go? Do I stay in sport? And I think ideally that's where I'd like to stay. But is there something that I need to go and learn hard and fast again elsewhere to come back into sport? So I think that's kind of the conversation I'm having in my head at the moment. But ultimately, everyone wants to work in something that they're interested and passionate about. And for me, that's around sustainability in sport. I think it's such an exciting space. I think it's a really collaborative space with lots of kind of good-hearted, well-intentioned people working in this area, trying to all push in the right direction. And I think that's also a nice place to be, when you've got peers who are willing to have conversations and willing to sense check things. And again, it's just that collaborative environment. So
it's amazing.
So yes.
And I did think last year when I saw you at the job, I thought it's like such a perfect role, but you're like, again, working towards the games, but in a very different way.
Yes.
No medals, but still working towards games. It's fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah. No medals, but still big ambitions and still big kind of things to deliver on. So it's not a shiny round gold thing, but it's still it's still pretty much the same type of mentality, I suppose. And like, you've got a deadline, you're in a project, you're working with a team to go after an ambition and a goal and an objective that you've put out there. And let's work really hard, try and bring people together and make sure that we make that happen. And it's kind of similar in a few veins, but just completely on the other side of the coin. And it's interesting to see the other, how much work, how many people, and how many dedicated people it takes to put on an event like that. When you're an athlete, I don't think you kind of realize you're in your own kind of bubble, and you turn up, it's all about performance. But the amount of dedicated people that it takes to put on an event like that is phenomenal as well.
Unbelievable. And hopefully carbon neutral as well, which is great to see. We're looking forward to see.
Yes, that's the big ambition I was talking about, creating a carbon neutral legacy for the games. So watch this space over the next few months, and we'll hopefully bring more details.
Yeah, amazing. So listen, to finish off with, what's something that you would either say to yourself back when you were starting off, which maybe because of your transition doesn't really sit right, but just people who are working in this space that you think the transition you've been through as an athlete, now as a professional in the industry, etc. Is there a piece of advice or a nugget of wisdom you'd share with people on their journey towards this?
Oh, it's difficult. Because life moves so fast, and like, we don't often take stock of learnings. We almost just take them on kind of we almost just take them on as we go, and kind of just playing those through in my head. I suppose if I think to where through my kind of journey and that transition, I think one of the key things was kind of, you mentioned it before, is just like that being curious, like willing to be curious, and I don't know much, might not know much about this, but I want to know more about this, and I want to be a bit brave and find out more about that and ask those questions. And I think that curiosity is so important in terms of trying to learn in this space, because not everyone knows all the answers. Everyone's on this journey together, like everyone's trying to kind of go in the same direction, but just to be curious and collaborative, I think is a key thing. Don't know if that amounts to wisdom, but I think that's just.
I think it does. I think it very much does. I think even where you're a quote unquote supposed expert on certain things, I still think if I think just reflect on that, the people I know who are probably the best at what they do, no matter how much they know, they still don't think they know enough. They're always curious. They always want to learn more. They always want to hear other perspectives. They want to hear what other people are doing and how they've tackled challenges. So I think, a macro banner of staying curious is a brilliant one in terms of people on this journey, because we're never going to solve sustainability in our lifetime. We're never going to be like, oh, brilliant, climate change.
Nailed it.
On to the next one. So no matter how much we do and how much we learn, there's always going to be more, isn't there? So I think that's a brilliant one for people to think about in their own journeys on sustainability. So thank you so much for taking the time, Jo. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
To chat to you. So that was Joie Leigh, former GB and England hockey player, now working with Birmingham Commonwealth Games 2022. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Climate of Sport podcast. Please like and subscribe, and get in touch if you want to share information about the work that you're doing, if you want to appear as a guest, or you want to recommend guests, or you just have ideas of conversations you'd like us to have. You can get in touch by emailing info@sportpositivesummit.com.